Hello, everyone. Welcome to the TDWI webinar program. I'm Brenda Woodbridge, and I'll be your moderator today. For today's program, we're going to talk about how to maximize your migration, keys to successfully migrate to the data cloud. Our sponsor today is Elation. For our presentations today, we'll first hear from David Stoddard with TDWI. After Dave speaks, we have a presentation from Anthony Serafin with Texas Mutual Insurance, followed by a presentation from Matt Turner with Elation. But before I turn over the time to our speakers, I'd like to go over a few basics. Today's webinar will be will be just over an hour long. At the end of the presentations, our speakers will host a question and answer period. If at any time during these presentations you'd like to submit a question, just use the Ask a Question area on your screen to type in your question. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, click on the Help area located below the slide window and you'll receive technical assistance. If you'd like to discuss this webinar on Twitter with fellow attendees, just include the hashtag TDWI in your tweets. Finally, if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, use the Click Here for a PDF line there on the left middle of your console. In addition, we are recording today's event, and we'll be emailing you a link to an archived version so you can view the presentation again later if you choose, or share it with a colleague. Okay, again today we're going to talk about maximize your migration, keys to successfully migrate to the cloud. Our first speaker today is David Stoddard, Senior Director of Research and Business Intelligence at TDWI. As an analyst, writer, and researcher, Dave has provided thought leadership on key topics in BI, analytics, IT, and information management for over 2 decades. Previously, he headed up his own independent firm and served as Vice President and Research Director with Ventana Research. He was the founding chief editor of Intelligent Enterprise, a major publication and media site dedicated to the BI and data warehousing community, and served as editorial director there for 9 years. With TDWI Research, Dave focuses on providing research-based insight and best practices for organizations implementing BI, analytics, performance management, and related technologies and methods. Dave, I'll turn things over to you now.
Thank you, Brenda, and welcome to everyone who's attending, and Anthony and Matt as well. I think we've got a great event today, our virtual solution spotlight, so let's get rolling here. Before I get started with my presentation, I wanted to just bring in our audience and see what's on your minds in terms of what you're seeing as challenges in your organization regarding cloud migration. So let's just get started right off with a poll question. So what is your biggest challenge in achieving the benefits your organization seeks from cloud migration? Is it governance and data security challenges, which is something we'll definitely be talking about quite a bit today because that often rises to the top? Is it that you need better business and IT leadership for cloud migration strategies? So, getting the principal leaders together on what is the strategy for cloud migration. Is it concerns about cost and complexity of cloud data migration? So you're looking at how you're going to get to the cloud, but the cost and complexity, and we'll certainly be talking about those issues. Is it hard to migrate siloed and complex on-premises data platforms? So you're looking at your data platforms, and it's hard to think about how to migrate them anywhere, including the cloud. Is it too much manual work and administration? You need more automation. And then finally, you need more effective use of a data catalog in cloud data migration and pipeline processes. Again, a topic we'll be talking about today. Okay, let's take a look at what the results are. And yes, not surprisingly, 35.7% saying governance and data security challenges are their top concern. So I won't get ahead of myself. We talk about that quite a bit. Let's see the other results. Well, actually 25% saying too much manual work and administration and need automation. So there looks like a very important need for good tooling, better automation, smarter automation, those kind of things. So those are the two leaders, and then we've also got pretty good representation across the board for the other concerns. Okay, so I think we'll be hitting all of these as we go through our spotlight today. So just to get started, I'd like to begin with kind of getting the big picture. And well, the big picture is clearly there's high demand for migration to the cloud. We certainly see it in our research, and had the benefit of being at TWI for 10 years now. So I've seen the numbers rise in terms of trying to get to the cloud. It used to be much smaller, particularly around BI, analytics, data warehousing. Initially, these were some of the slower systems to get to the cloud. I think because of some of the issues we saw in our poll question, the complexity, the issues around governance, and trying to keep some of that data, the crown jewels, so to speak, close to the vest. But now, really in the last, I'd say 5 years, we've seen just increasing migration to the cloud. So a lot of those kind of security and control issues are being addressed as organizations go to the cloud. So today's fluid conditions definitely demand more flexibility, scale, and ease of use. And these are some of the things that can really be appealing about cloud platforms than on-premises systems allow. So our top drivers, we see agility, so around the needing the flexibility with lower upfront investment. So agility has, of course, always been a big need, but the problem with many on-premises and traditional systems is just so expensive to try to get that agility, and so the cloud offers that. Modernize to afford newer ways of achieving, that should be scale and speed, not sale and speed, but, could be sale. So kind of, again, with that agility needed and the modernization, digital transformation, drawing data management to the cloud. So this is where organizations are putting processes and operations in the cloud, and they want to bring the associated data to the cloud. Or there could be the issue of data gravity, where they're adopting software as a service, and other kinds of services in the cloud, and they're generating a lot of data, and so it makes sense to bring the data management to the cloud because that's where the data is being generated. And then foster better collaboration on data. Certainly in our, talk about fluid conditions, talking about the pandemic kind of era we've been in and everyone working remotely, collaboration on data is very important, and to be able to have the data available, cloud has been very important to that. We see in our research 54% anticipate more input into cloud-based BI analytics and data management strategies from the business side. So this is very much a business-driven trend. In other words, it's not just IT, but IT and business working together. But we can see here that going forward, the business side is playing a big role. They want systems to go to the cloud. They want data available. They want it easy to get to. They want it to scale and flexible. Okay. So evolving needs of cloud data management. I mentioned before the BI and analytics. Well, analytics is definitely a very strong driver. And I wrote right here that it's not the only driver, because we see organizations, I mentioned, the digital transformation and also the need for data consolidation and reducing silos, which I'll talk about in my next slide. But thinking about analytics for a minute, that's definitely always been a big driver of data lakes. And now we've seen such a rise in cloud data lakes, as this just makes a lot more sense to take advantage of less expensive storage in the cloud, again, the availability of the data in the cloud. That here's a note that it takes too long to add data to using traditional data warehousing processes. Of course, some would say it should take a long time because you want to get through the data transformation, quality, profiling kind of procedures. But we definitely see organizations deciding to just get the data to the cloud, migrate to the cloud, move the data to the cloud, and then do all those procedures in that ELT fashion, where they load the data and then do the transformations there. So all this is definitely driven by a need to do more analytics, to get business value from the data by being able to apply it to daily decisions and strategies, all the things that analytics can bring. And so the cloud there, again, enabling data management to take advantage of the scalability, the high volume of data that's often necessary for analytics, more flexible storage and processing. So the consolidation issue, as I said, that is a big driver, because organizations already have a lot of data silos, and they want to reduce those data silos. And so we see that is one of the top reasons organizations are trying to move to the cloud, is to consolidate some of those data silos. And some of the issues they're facing, well, the fragmentation, making it difficult to get the single view of the data that so many users need, and really for analytics, be able to kind of look at different types of data together. Can be very difficult if you have to bridge all these different silos. There tends to be a lot of point-to-point manual coding move data between different silos. And users, we do see in our research, are spending too much time on access and preparation. So just getting to the data, finding the data, accessing data, and then going through the data quality, the profiling, transformation, other kinds of procedures involved in data preparation. And that crowds out the time that they can spend on analytics. So cloud consolidation for data management and for governance can often make a lot of sense to reduce that data movement, the copying, the replication, all that kind of activity, and then use the scalable processing that you have in the cloud for different types of workloads, because often the silos are really set up for just one use case or a small number of use cases, and therefore just a select number of workloads. And then using scalable processing in the cloud that can often use as one platform, one data architecture to handle lots of different workloads. But that said, we're certainly seeing in our research a lot of hybrid multi-cloud. So hybrid being on-premises and in the cloud, and then systems and multiple cloud platforms. So this adds some complexity to any kind of migration plans. Just looking at our research, currently running in the cloud, 41% data warehouse, 39% data lake, ETL up there too, 38%, and then data pipelines, getting the data to and from places, sources to targets, 25% in the cloud. So it's common. Hybrid multi-cloud environments are very common. This mixture, some organizations are augmenting on-premises, and that's what they plan to do for at least the foreseeable future. They will continue to have on-premises systems, but just augment, say, the data warehouse with more availability of the data, more storage, all those kind of considerations. Others are actually in the middle of a multi-year migration strategy, so they plan to move all these systems to the cloud, but it's just not something that can be done overnight. Some organizations are looking, they want to avoid vendor lock-in, so that's often a driver behind multi-cloud, so having systems on Amazon, on Google, on Microsoft, on other platforms can be a good idea to avoid vendor lock-in. They may have to adhere to regional governance issues. In fact, that's very common in Europe or other locations around the world that need to have the data located there, and so they cannot just consolidate data into one cloud platform. Or it could be due to business changes, mergers and acquisitions, other kinds of changes that bring in new platforms. This is often for large organizations a continuous process, and so that for that reason they'll always have kind of a hybrid multi-cloud situation. So it creates problems of integration complexity amid often uncontrolled growth, because obviously data doesn't stop growing. So it's a continuous kind of situation organizations have to address. Now, getting to the cloud, there's different strategies. And thinking about the complexity that organizations are facing, the multi-cloud or multi-cloud and hybrid situations, there is often no one strategy that makes sense. So it often can depend. So just laying it out here, there's a few lift and shift that's sort of been popular, where you're basically just trying to get that cloud-based image of what the existing data warehouse or ETL or data lake system is. And, often some of the drawbacks of that is that you're bringing with it kind of a legacy processes with that. But often we see that very popular. Just get it to the cloud. Other organizations are doing a phased migration, so intentionally moving just pieces of, say, the data warehouse architecture might be associated with segregated data sets or particular end-user functions. And so different stages or components are migrated, tested, validated along the way. And this can often be a good strategy because you can do all those procedures and make sure everything's up and running for the users in a phased way. Some organizations are starting small and then plan to grow. And so they use cloud services as a runway for evaluating how different cloud services providers support needs. So this is a good way to test different types of platforms and see if they're working, and then can evaluate the costs and investments that they're getting into there in sort of a more of an incremental way. Some organizations are doing anything new goes to the cloud, so they're going to maintain their existing systems, not force the migration of those existing production systems because they work. Why mess with them? But all future development goes to the cloud. And then there's issues around balancing private and public cloud, because some systems are more appropriate for, like if you have sensitive data for private cloud, whereas public might be the right place, or if there's less of a concern. Then there's issues that you kind of get into the depth of trying to understand whether the systems are single or multi-tenancy, and some of the disadvantages and disadvantages of each of those in terms of shielding the data from things that could happen on the cloud data platform. But then, often additional costs around single tenancy systems make multi-tenancy make more sense, and so a lot of issues there. And then, of course, the final one is there's no overall strategy, and we do see that in our research as well, where organizations are kind of going in a piecemeal fashion. Just one business unit puts up a data platform here, another there. Maybe some systems that IT is driving migrate there, and often this can create problems, as you can imagine. So looking at our research, the top challenges in migration to the cloud, we asked what are the biggest challenges, as we did in the poll question today. And some of the answers, 57% saying managing costs up front and long term is the number one issue. 45% saying regulatory compliance and protecting sensitive data. So there we can see the governance concerns. Data loading, movement, and integration, 38% saying that's the big issue. So it's just the kind of the plumbing of just trying to get the data into the cloud. 38% saying integrating on-premises and cloud-based data. And we certainly see this in the hybrid multi-cloud environments when users want that single view. They want to be able to access all relevant data. This can be difficult. 29% saying lack proper tools for data management. Again, looking again probably for more automation and better tooling there. 22% saying data portability and potential for vendor lock-in is a challenge. So we saw that, we see that in our research as well, and a reason for often having multi-cloud systems. So I mentioned data pipelines, just to talk about that for a little bit. They are popular for cloud movement, and again, there's a variety of data pipelines. Some are data streaming, so you're just trying to get the data as fast as possible into a data lake, typically as a target landing spot. Others involve many more kinds of data preparation processes around data quality, data profiling, validation, looking for ways to enrich the data and transformation. So right here, increasingly automated pipelines used for different migration strategies, really all of those that I mentioned before. Some of the challenges organizations are facing with pipelines become numerous, and of course sources are often numerous. There could be hundreds or thousands of sources, and so you're talking about often pipelines for each one of these, so they can be numerous and voluminous. There can be unknown dependencies between pipelines, so if something is changed in a pipeline, or say in an ETL routine, the organization needs to know, administrators need to know what is affected by that, and often they're not having visibility into that. Need for end-to-end integration of the data ingestion, profiling, quality, transformation, enrichment, governance. All these steps can be kind of separate, but it certainly is more efficient, and things don't fall through the holes, fall through gaps, if they're much more integrated in an end-to-end fashion. And often pipelines bring up rising costs. There's redundancy, inefficiencies. These can drive costs, lots of inconsistency, quality problems. And, of course, these need to be caught before they get baked into applications, dashboards, and analytics models. So there needs to be a lot of oversight, and there often isn't, around data pipelines. But metadata intelligence can be very important for that kind of oversight and just understanding what's happening with the data, where the data is, making it easier to find. So metadata, the data about the data, and really can make it much easier to find, understand where relevant data is, how to bring it together, which data sets are trusted, so there's a kind of a that improves collaboration, knowing the data that you are migrating, so it's not surprising what's in the data lake or in the data warehouse. So for all these things, helping governance, improving quality, speedier data integration, metadata intelligence, often in a data catalog, can make a big difference. Some of the challenges are, of course, that metadata itself can be complicated. There can be a lot of metadata, lots of applications, database systems. They're all sort of generating metadata and have metadata, so it can be difficult to pull it all together. As I mentioned, multiple types. You might have, all of these are important. Technical metadata around formats and structures of the data, database schemas and mappings, transformations, and then at a higher level, business metadata, where you get descriptive, higher level meaning of the data expressed in the business language. So often this is the data glossary, the business glossary. And then there's operational infrastructure metadata that is around the processing of the data, issues around execution logs, error logs, runtime statistics, maintenance issues, rules around that. So those can be part of the metadata as well. And then the usage metadata, which is where it's collaborative, kind of user ratings, annotations, kind of crowdsourced material, comments, what data sets are best. And so all of this is, can be very complex. And so we see 36% plan to use a data catalog or gather metadata, but only 9% are very satisfied. So, and really part of the problem is that a lot of this has been, the legacy of this has been a lot of manual work involved. But really over the last few years, we've seen incredible automation and sort of smart automation using AI really changing the game with metadata management and data catalogs. We see the connection here between governance and metadata right in our research. We ask here for your organization, which of the following goals are most important in setting up a centralized data catalog, glossary, or metadata repository? And we can see that governance kinds of issues are very important. 57% saying that improving governance, security, and regulatory adherence is a key reason. Of course, the key reason is making it easier for users to search for and find data. And that's probably really the number one thing that organizations are looking for from using a data catalog or metadata. But all of these are important. Inventorying data assets, so this is key for regulatory adherence and just governance generally. Coordinating data meaning across sources, 50% saying that, again, that ability to search for the data, find the data, coordinate meeting across sources. And then the other one I have circled, 43% centrally monitor data usage and lineage. So I'll talk about lineage a little bit more in a moment, but you can see how these might compare to your organization, the role of a data catalog. All right, data lineage. It is key to governance and data trust. So lineage is basically just about knowing where the data came from, what's happening to the data, who is using the data, who's accountable for the data. And then it becomes important for governance because of regulations around personally identifiable information, sensitive data, and the need for explainability in analytics and analytics models. And so a lot of this is about being able to track back where the data came from, what's its path, its life cycle through the organization, and to be able to answer questions about whether you're protecting sensitive data and then where the analytics came from in terms of where the data came from. So knowing the data origins, the ownership, administration, key parts of that data lineage. I think I've hit these points. Dealing with different regulations and lineage is important here because obviously there's not just one set of regulations, particularly you're looking globally, need the ability to manage lots of different regulations. And so there's different data classifications and taxonomies around that. So lineage key for that. Lineage, got to know the lineage to have consistent procedures in sourcing of the new data so it can be part of that pipeline process, the oversight that I was talking about that often is missing in the development of data pipelines and management of data pipelines. Internally, it's about data trust. So one of the first questions is often asked when you look at a visualization or look at the results of an analytics process is, tell me about the data. Can I trust this data? And so lineage is important to be able to answer questions about that and understand the accuracy and quality of the data across the sources. So we see in our research kind of middling results around this. How well can people use data catalog to find the data, understand data relationships, and tap it about data and its lineage? 27% dissatisfied, 21% neither satisfied or dissatisfied, 23% satisfied, 29% do not have a data catalog. So, so we can see sort of middling results and a need for catalogs there. How well can organizations address requirements for governance? 43% say they need a major upgrade, only 12% very satisfied. And then how satisfied with governance and tracking data lineage across hybrid environments of on-premises and cloud-based systems? 42% saying they need a major upgrade there, and only 9% very satisfied. So lots of room for improvement, and I think we'll see numbers, satisfaction numbers, I would guess, rising in the next few years as organizations adopt more advanced tooling. So data catalogs, just to kind of bring up this again, catalogs for capturing data lineage, thinking about the governance and cloud data migration, integration issues. Lineage across hybrid environments can be very difficult, and an important use of tools and smarter tooling because it's a lot of data movement, as I mentioned, the hundreds, often thousands of these systems going on. So it's beyond a lot of the manual processes and procedures and need good tooling there. In moving and migrating BI and reporting and analytics to the cloud, Lineage is very important to track how the data is used in the advanced analytics, because often we see as there is a migration of these BI reporting, data warehousing systems that are supporting reporting and analytics to the cloud, the lineage that may have been understood in the on-premises systems gets lost as it moves to the cloud. So that's an important hole to fill there when in that procedure. Holistic metadata management view of pipeline processes. So again, getting that oversight of the processes, spotting the inconsistencies and discrepancies. And then for governance, resilience, change management, being able to find the data quickly, know where the data is, particularly as you're trying to address situations that are unanticipated. So there's a lot of change management issues, rather than having to waste a lot of time with that. To have that information available and visible can be very important. Okay, so just to conclude my presentation, achieving the benefits of cloud migration, I'd say three things are very definitely key. First is to have a plan that fits your strategy. So as I mentioned before, there's lots of different styles of migrations, so there's not one size fits all. But think about agility and flexibility, some of the big drivers around cloud, the business drivers behind cloud migration. So migration needs to be flexible and tuned to those business priorities. So have a plan that really fits those. Second is use knowledge about the data effectively. So the data catalog, the metadata intelligence, that kind of knowledge can be very helpful to improve data findability, to reduce the confusion, particularly when a new and unanticipated situation arises, and then have better end-to-end integration of data pipeline processes so to reduce confusion and waste there. And then finally, certainly focus on governance, govern cloud data migration, and use that knowledge that you've developed in a data catalog, that capability around data lineage, and be aware of the exposures that could be arising during the data movement. Okay, with that, thank you very much. Brenda, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Dave. And just a quick reminder to our audience, if you have a question, you can enter it at any time in the Ask a Question window. We'll be answering the audience questions in the final portion of our program today. Our next speaker is Anthony Seraphim with Texas Mutual Insurance. Anthony is the Vice President of Data Governance at Texas Mutual Insurance with more than 20 years experience in data and analytics. He defines strategy to increase organizational knowledge, enable fact-based decision-making, generate revenue, reduce costs, and achieve business goals. Anthony enables his teams to respond to changing business drivers, strategic direction, and stakeholder expectations. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you, Brenda, and good morning, everyone. I'm here to share our journey of cloud migration at Texas Mutual. Excited to be here. Data governance is my favorite topic and my job. So with that, just an introduction into who we are at Texas Mutual. We are a workers' compensation insurance company focused on Texas. We act as insurers of the last resort, right? And this is what I'm passionate about, prevent on-the-job injuries. So we have a great safety program which we share with our employers to prevent injuries. And if an episode or an injury happens, we work really hard in minimizing their consequences. So what are we focused on? What are we working towards? We are working towards building a stronger and safer Texas. That's our motto. That's what every program, every initiative at Texas Mutual strives towards. That's why I come to work every day. So as you can see, it's important to us, but that's why we at Texas are the leading workers' compensation insurer. So I joined Texas Mutual 2 years back. And as I joined, I spent first couple of months talking to our business leaders. and trying to understand what data challenges they have, right? Before we even talked about cloud migration, it was about talking to the business, including them in our conversation. Listening to them, it was a lot of anecdotal conversations around, well, when I look at our dashboards, when I look at our reports, I have to question the source for the data. I have to call someone, right? I have to call the 3 subject matter experts at Texas Mutual, who are super busy, by the way, and are on every project. I have to call them. I have to ask them where the data came from. What are the business rules which were used? Every time we ran reports and dashboards multiple times, the numbers would change, right? So the vision which I created for our organization was to build trust of business on data. Every conversation, every priority conversation around initiatives which happens in my team is geared toward building trust of business. That's how we work. So how do we go about this? And why cloud first? So why did we pick cloud first strategy? And really the driver commonly, which in the industry people think is not cost. It was not cost for us. It was our desire to use the new capabilities which are available in the cloud. Every vendor we talk to is going to the cloud, right? So if we didn't start our cloud first strategy, it would be dragged to the cloud. So that was our driver, right? So what does it look like for us? Current state, I just gave you an example, right? General lack of trust on data. So when business leaders look at reports and dashboards, the information on there, they're focused more on questioning quality rather than making decisions. So what does our future state look like? Looks like trusted data. So when business users look at those reports and dashboards, they are able to consume the information in the report and dashboard and make decisions. That's what future state looks like, right? So we are on-prem, we moved to the data cloud. So we picked Snowflake. I'll talk a little more about that. Our data warehouse, 15 years ago, 15 years old. All the decisions and designs made at that time, very good at that time, but it is 15 years old. Technology has changed. We have generally not put a lot of investment in the legacy data warehouse. So as you can imagine, it has issues, major issues. What do we want to do? We used modern tools like Alation. I'll talk more about Alation, but we used a more cloud-based ETL tools and data quality tools, right? We want it to be low code, so we focus more on finding the right tools. The last current state, in our legacy data warehouse, it's a black box, right? If business is, why does this data look like this? A developer has to comb through lines of code to find why, right? There is no one place where it's documented. There is no one answer to that question. And sometimes it takes a couple of weeks to get that answer. And you can imagine the frustration of our business users. What do you want to create? Future state. What does it look like? Transparency. Business leaders and business owners who really own the data and the process understand what's being developed, understand the technical rules. They understand the business rules in the code itself, so they can trust the data. So what are we trying to migrate? This is my favorite slide. I call it universe of the data. You can call it conceptual diagram. What I did is after I had my conversations with the business leaders, I put this together. And the intent here was for us at an enterprise level, stare at this one slide and understand the scope of data movement. So the gray boxes you see are data domains. It's aligned claims, finance, as you can imagine. It's aligned to our business units. The boxes in there, the blue boxes, I'll talk about colored boxes. The blue boxes are the data which that business unit cares about. Right. It's at the conceptual level, but this literally reflects our business. The colored boxes, so you see, for example, feedback, and feedback is there in multiple different boxes in multiple different business units. My intention of reflecting and showing this to the business unit was, hey, look, we collect feedback in multiple different business units using multiple tools. So if we launch a program like CRM, we need to be able to integrate this information. People knew that anecdotally, but when they see it, they understand the complexity in our cloud migration. So now we've defined what are we migrating, right? Here's the plan. This has a lens of data governance. So there's definitely more to the plan, but this reflects our data governance plan to support our cloud migration. On the left side, the little picture, that's like a one-pager of the plan, and I'm highlighting what are the specific things you should focus to build the foundation. Number one, and Dave talked about this, right, around sensitive information and regulation. You need to have a data classification policy. You need to have a data classification policy which is simple for the enterprise to understand, right? So what I mean by that is a lot of organizations struggle to classify data at an attribute, at a column level. It takes way too long. My recommendation is have a simple data classification policy. We have 4 states. We have 4 different types of classification: restricted, confidential, internal, and public, right? And we have taken my favorite slide you saw, all the subdomains, and classified in just 4 different categories of classification. Simple, right? Everyone understands it. The language and the term which is used in the universe of the data is coming from business. It came from business leaders. They understand that language. And it is very important for business to understand because they own that data. They understand the classification. So I would recommend don't approach classification from the classical technical side of the world. Approach it from the business perspective, from how business leaders understand. Next, I would say data retention framework. Every cloud conversation about data migration you will need a data retention. Why do I call it a data retention framework? Because it's not a policy. It's not a prescribed policy. Organizations, again, struggle when they try to prescribe how long you need to keep claims data versus safety services, so on and so forth. Our data retention framework is a set of questions, well-thought set of questions, which is given to our business leaders who own different parts of our data cloud migration initiative, and for our product owners. They sit together, answer those set of questions, and they have a data retention for that track. Third, and this is not by how you should do it or high priority versus low priority, these all 5 things are important. Number 3, data catalog implementation. I'll talk how Alation has helped us, but this is definitely not the focus in cloud migration. It's starting to get popular. I will demonstrate how it helped us move forward. Data certification. The simple concept of data certification we have is gold, silver, bronze. We certify our data set. We also have uncertified data, which is doesn't have the need to certify it. But our data certification of gold, silver, and bronze depends on the use of that data set as well as on the audience. So some data might just be good at bronze level, and some definitely need to be at a gold level. For example, we have a daily written premium, which dashboard, which every business leader looks at almost on a daily basis, because that tells us our health of revenue coming into our organization. That needs to be gold certified. What that does is it builds trust for our business. When they're looking at a dashboard or when they're trying to use a data set, they look at the certification and they know that it's already gone through a process, and they don't need to question the quality of that data. They can focus on what that data set and dashboard and report is telling them. Last but not the least, data quality management framework. Day one automation. We introduced day one automation. We can test 1,000 tables in a couple of hours. Day one automation, the way I would say approach it, and this is how we approached it, is different maturity level. You can't achieve highest level maturity day one. Define your first phase, and we have 3 levels of data maturity, data quality maturity, 1, 2, and 3. Define what that looks for you. For us, it looked at day one automation as level 1. We defined specific use cases as level 1, and we defined timeframes to jump from level 1 to level 2 and level 2 to level 3. That gave us that flexibility, and it gave us speed to market. We were able to migrate some data sets very quickly. Even though it's low level 1 maturity, it solves the business purpose depending on the audience, like certification. So what does cloud data stewardship look like? And this directly aligns with data management. Before you start your data migration, you need, number one, make sure your business is on board and they understand that they are accountable for the data, right? So treat your data governance as a business process. Same like claims and same like your underwriting, treat it as a business process, not a technology initiative. Framework over process. The reason I pick framework over process is I don't want to be prescriptive. We didn't see data governance as a heavy-handed approach. We created framework and created flexibility. So depending on the business use scenario and depending on the data set, depending on the audience, we can be flexible. So for example, our data retention, it depends on that specific need and of that data set and how long we need to retain that data. Make sure it's business use case driven. So you're not just plopping, at least for us, we didn't plop data from one place to the other place. Every time we moved data, there was a dashboard, analytics use case, which was the purpose for moving this 3 or 10 data sets. Partner with the business leaders, engage at the top, right? So we have a data governance council, which all the vice presidents of different business units are the lead data stewards. They are the buck stops at them. They are the decision makers. And that's when you can actually influence data issues or data initiatives. Last but not the least, focus on enterprise data issues. All business units have their specific data issues. And they're really good in silos solving them for their business unit. What we wanted to do was we engaged all the VPs and we brought every data issues at an enterprise level. So every business unit had a voice in it. Every business unit had a voice in solving for it. And that is critical because it will help you move much faster rather than finding things at the end. So how did Elation help us? How does a data catalog help you, right? I get asked this question a lot, right? So the approach which we decided before when we signed the contract was, number sure, working with the business units to understand that they're part of the process, empowering them. Elation is a tool which will empower your business users, right? Give them the tools, make them understand. We had multiple training sessions with our business units on how Elation can help, what capabilities they have, right? And third, I would say engage, collaborate. Make sure business is part of the conversation and not an afterthought. So data catalog as an enabler real quick, right? Ownership, business ownership is clearly defined. We have defined critical data elements, most important to business units. These are the attributes business units care the most. We established, like I talked about, data classification policy. Elation is our one-stop shop for data information. You can go and find any information on data in Elation. We have it. Google-like search. Elation has Google-like search. In first 3 results, you'll find what you're looking for, and our business loves it, right? We have our machine learning. Elation has machine learning. We are able to ingest a lot of technical metadata, and it is presented to our business users in a very usable approach. Right? We use a concierge model. Elation, and this is my team member. Elation, anybody who wanted to use had any questions around Alation, they had one person to go to. They could pick a phone and call them. They could email, they could instant message, and Tisha was extremely responsive and is extremely responsive for every question. They didn't have to go and try to figure it out by themselves. Last couple of them implement data certification and expose data lineage. That is a critical piece for us. Our business units now know where the data is coming from. So at the end, the gist of my conversation here, my presentation. Number one, before you even think about cloud migration, figure out what capabilities are offered in the data cloud which you want to use. For us, it was almost no database administration. It was about performance, right? We had anecdotes where people wrote queries and went and got coffee in the legacy data warehouse and came back and still they didn't see results. Now, they type a query, they submit it, and blink, there's a result. Tremendous performance. Design the data cloud platform based on actual business need. This is not a technology initiative, it's a business initiative. Figure out what those business use cases are. Deliver against those, not just a technical migration. Key for us to be successful. Ensure data quality and stewardship is key part of the initiative. Quality is transparent. People understand what that quality looks like. And last but not the least, this worked for us really well. Focus on finding the right partner instead of just the right product. A lot of organizations focus, all their use case scenarios are based on finding the right product. My take on this, what we did is we found the right partner. If you find the right partner on your initiative, they will help you define capabilities you need. Find the right partner. Thank you. That's all I had. Back to you, Brenda.
Thank you so much, Anthony. So our next speaker today is Matt Turner with Alation. Matt is the Director of Industry Strategy at Alation, where he works closely with customers and partners to help them bring data intelligence and data culture to their organizations and realize the value of data in their industries. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Brenda, and thanks, Anthony. I don't know how I can really follow that, but I'll do my best. I really, really appreciate you sharing not just how you got there, but really the mission and the way that you've been able to bring data to the forefront of all your business users at Texas Mutual. And I appreciate the kind words about a partnership. And David as well for really highlighting so many of the issues. I'm going to kind of wrap things up a little bit, just give you a little bit of perspective about what we do at Alation and how that even fits in even more with this picture of data cloud migration, thinking about how to maximize the cloud migration. So just want to start with an intro. Anthony did such a great job, and actually David did a great job talking about the data catalog. Just a couple more details about Alation. We are the data catalog company. We created the space, pioneered the data market in 2012, and our founders had a really unique perspective. They wanted to create not just a place like a sort of data dictionary that's in a drawer or data catalog that you go to once in a while. They wanted to create a living, breathing, and critically user-centric tool that would really enable you to know your data and put that data into action. And this perspective had a couple of different outcomes in terms of what we've actually created at Alation. And so many of the things that both Anthony and David talk about come into play here because it's not just the data. It's not just the information about it, the data, what rows and columns there are, but for Alation, that it also includes, for instance, how things are used, understanding queries, ingesting queries and letting you see which elements or which tables are more popular. It includes all the collaboration and community activity that takes place around your data and all the documentation. And this world of information about your data, this gives you this really complete picture of your information that's so critical in using the data catalog and being able to do the governance to get into the cloud, for instance. But we also just didn't leave this up to the people, to the humans in the equation. David talked a little bit about how AI is starting to come into the space, and Alation pioneered the use of machine learning. You can see that we were mentioning this Forrester Wave, and our behavior analysis engine has been in place since day one to not only help you understand the data, which is a big, big task, and I think that's really been one of the leaps forward, is that you can look across your complex enterprise data. Anthony, I love that you put up all the different data sources, the details on it. There's machine learning and algorithms to help you understand that, but we also flip the coin on the other side and give you that great search navigation experience that's also driven by all that rich information and augmented by the behavior analysis engine to help people get to the right data. So putting a little bit of help for the people into it is one of the big things. And then we put all this data into action in the context of governance and policy. It's what our customers call, and because of the nature of Alation, because it's a UI that people go to, it's what our customers call active data governance. Everybody who uses the catalog is continually aware of the policy or the privacy needed to work with the data, or in fact the validity and quality of the data. And everyone using the catalog can also contribute to it. I thought Anthony did such a great job to show this as a continual process, and we really believe that active data governance is what you're doing, and then maybe there's a continuous data governance cycle. So this kind of perspective and the results it drives. I mean, Anthony talked about getting the cloud. Some of our customers, like the guys at Daimler Group, they report that access to data has gone from weeks to hours. Dramatic changes in how effectively people can get access to data and how unsafe it is. So because of this different approach, we tend to stand out. We're in several leader quadrants. So from the Gartner report, where we're in the leader and the Forrester waves, and there's a Forrester wave coming out tomorrow, so keep your eyes peeled. And also because this whole approach to knowing your data is so important for the move to the cloud, we're also recognized by Snowflake as the Data Governance Partner of the Year. So a little bit more on Alation. Before I kind of wrap things all the way up, I do want to know a little bit more from you. So we had the interaction at the beginning where we wanted to talk about what was holding you back, and I just want to hear, and if you guys can quickly click through, what's your primary benefit? What are you looking for? Anthony mentioned, and I think this is great, and in fact, I stopped him and said, what about cost? And he said, no, this is about taking advantage of new features. So I'm wondering what you guys think. Is it speeding up access to data, flexibility and scale, thinking about cost savings, maybe that, kind of underlying context of our whole conversation, better governance of data? And I hope everybody's going to vote, and we'll see what all of you are thinking. Anthony or David, do you have you want to pick a winner? You guys are still on?
Hey, I was going to pick better governance of data.
Yeah, we can put our thumb on the scale, huh? David?
Oh, I think that's a great choice, but also flexibility and scale. Those are two we see a lot in our research.
So it is better governance of data. But really, you're right there. You're right up on the next one. So good choices. Thank you guys for playing on. I realize this is really a great place for all of the above. I think so many of these conversations rely on all these factors mixed together. And that's kind of what we've seen. So Anthony shared some great examples, really great story about how the mission in Texas is really, Texas Mutual, is bolstered by data. I just wanted to give you two additional perspectives. Anthony, you're not alone. So out there, we've heard from our friends our customers at Sainsbury. It's a big grocer in the UK, but they also own Argos, which is a huge online retailer. And this is a space where data is critical. It's a direct customer space, and it's also a space where the changes in the last 18 months have been dramatic, and data has become much more important. And like you, and taking some of the pages from everybody's book that we just talked about, they had a plan to go to the cloud to bring some of this data together, to really enable them to go across these disparate parts of the data and get some real insights. But also, like Anthony, they understood that it had to be done on a solid foundation of governance. So thinking about the catalog, using the way that Alation helps you really understand your data, they're able to get to this end state where users across the enterprise can efficiently search for and discover data, regardless of location, and ensure that data is properly governed and used in a compliant manner. There's a lot in there, but this part about making sure that not only did we get things to the cloud, but we took all of that pre-work so that we could rely on anybody from any part of the business, someone from Argos thinking about shopping trends in the supermarket, that they could actually use that data in the right way. Another example is our customer from CNA, just insurer like Texas Mutual on the commercial side. And they also saw the cloud as this big opportunity to modernize and rethink how they were working with data, their whole data operations. And they did something really interesting. early on in the process, their data governance teams and the data architecture team, so Scott there is from the data governance team, and the data architecture team, two people that may not see eye to eye, they actually created a new group that was called the Enterprise Data Standards Team. And this team, they created the team, and as Scott says, there's a webinar we can give you guys a link to. Scott says they created the team because they didn't want to miss this huge opportunity to set the standard and use the new tool sets going forward. And this team created guidelines and standards for everything going to the cloud, basic things like taxonomies and schemas, but also to get consistent governance. And their results, you can see their quote there, we identify critical sensitive data in relation and the associated regulatory applications. Their results, so they know where the HIPAA, the CCPA, the GDPR information is, and they call this kind of the red zone data. They actually know once, as they move into the cloud, no matter what perspective you took, all of this work that they did before meant that they can understand critically, especially in these areas of compliance, how that data is being used. So these kind of pictures, they're just building on what Anthony shared, which is great, and also building on what Anthony shared. It sort of comes together that when you're thinking about the cloud, there are a lot of different challenges and a lot of different factors. This is my version of what Anthony. So Anthony showed you all the different systems and how the interplay between all those different systems is one of the big challenges. Well, these are all the things that people think they're going to get out of the cloud. We're going to get that delivery value. We're going to deliver that business value, and all the different factors you need to take into cloud migration. And to figure out what you're going to move, you have to figure out all the different workloads and how they fit together. You have to think about policy. You have to think about security. And what I wanted to point out about this kind of picture, and also kind of build from what Anthony said, is that you have to do all this together. Cloud migration is not just one piece. You can't just take one little piece of this and get that done. The whole thing has to be considered, and it's a lot. And then I love pointing this out. There's a little cube in there that says driving innovation through cloud. So not only are we talking about one of the most complex infrastructure moves that any organization can take place, it's a cultural move for all the technology people, but on the business side, there's almost certainty. And I hope there's some business people on the call who will pick this up and say there is certainty because it's true, that we can drive innovation. We can help change our business through the cloud. So it's a lot. It's a lot to take in. It's a lot to do. And what it really boils down to is some of the fundamentals that David and Anthony both talked about, and having a plan, and also knowing who's involved. So this is actually a quote from, and it's a summary of some of these factors. It's a quote from Dan Kirsch, who's an analyst at Hurwitz Associates, but it's the context of this quote that's so important. This is actually a quote from, in fact, a tweet from a IDG CIO chat that my friend Miles Sewer ran a couple weeks ago. So this is an online chat on Twitter where they ask questions, and Dan was just summing up a lot of the topics that we've just been talking about that came up when they were talking about cloud migration. So CIOs, active CIOs, top of the business, some major companies were talking about, hey, yes, we want to get to the cloud, but we need to be secure. We really need to think about planning. And the reason I'm putting this in here is that it is a lot. There's a lot to think about, and it is top of mind for the business. This is at the C-suite. This is something that any kind of forward-thinking change maker CIO is thinking about. And there's a place for us to help. As Anthony talked about, data catalog is critical for this. And I think, and we think that we can help you understanding your data and understanding it in this broader context is really going to be one of these keys to cloud migration. So it can drive you to understand, get access to the data, deliver your results faster. It can help you migrate what matters. Knowing your data, both inside the cloud and outside the cloud, is key to understanding what's being used and actually how you might move it. And then you get into how the policy and governance works. Because it's integrated into what we do, scaling and letting people interact with policy is a key factor in a cloud migration. If you take all of your data sets and lock them down the same way you have them locked down inside your organization, you're not going to get that effective usage of the data. You're not going to get that business outcome. And so being able to understand that you have policies, using policy managers to actually distribute them, that's key to putting the data out there. And then having the data actually be used in this context and governed environment is key. So one key part of relation is that every interaction makes use of the policy and the governance. we have something called a query builder that allows you to go in and query data sets. As you're doing the query builder, as you're using the query builder, all of that governance information, not just to type ahead about what fields is there, but the information about whether the tables and the elements of the tables you're using and what policies might impact them, that's all available to you. And I think it's a great way to think about how hands-on you can get and how empowering that is, because the users understand what's going on in the system. And then for data stewards, they can see what's actually helping, and they can continue that virtual cycle of making that data better. So overall, we're happy to be part. We're really glad to be part of this conversation. Big thanks to Anthony, and huge thanks to David. We think we can all put together and power an intelligent cloud migration. And just want to leave you before we get to questions. We put together a site for everybody to go to have a few thoughts about data governance in the cloud. You can hear more about Texas Mutual. You can learn from our Chief Product Officer, Raj, and see some of his perspective. And then I want to invite everybody to come out. We do a weekly demo, and our next one on July 29th is going to be about data governance. So I want to invite everybody to visit these pages, and hopefully we'll help you get out to the cloud. And right now, we'll take some questions.
Thank you very much, Matt. So yes, as Matt said, let's get into our Q&A period now and answer some of our audience questions. I'm going to begin with Dave. Our IT organization is concerned about losing control of the data as we migrate to the cloud. How can business users who want more cloud migration put IT's concerns to rest?
Okay. Well, yeah, I think that we see that commonly, and Anthony and Matt, I think, brought up some great points about how to address some of those issues, and really revolving around the importance of governance. And I think I'm sure Anthony may have some input on this question as well, but the business dimension to it and making it really, as he spoke very eloquently about making it really a business process, not just about IT. So how to allay IT's concerns? Well, I think that, IT is under pressure to have good control of the data, to have good governance of the data, to ensure performance, availability of the data. And those are all kind of things that hang on to a governance plan. So it's not just all about regulatory, but it's also about kind of related to all of those things too, and ensuring trust in the data. Silo issues can often be a big problem if the business is moving fast to the cloud, and I mentioned it kind of in a piecemeal fashion. So an IT role there can be to encourage consolidation and look at where we can reduce redundancy, inconsistency, quality issues. So those are very positive roles that IT can play in that kind of business decision about it. And then IT, I think, could also be assured if there's accountability and responsibility on the business side to the data. So there's not just the fingers being pointed at IT, but that the business side is who's creating the data, who's sourcing the data, where it came from, and then the lineage being able to capture a lot of that. And then working together on increasing the return on investment. So treating the data as an important asset, and that's something that is also a shared responsibility of business and IT.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. This next one is for Matt. And then after he answers, if Anthony or Dave have anything to add to it, go ahead and feel free to do so. But the question from the audience is, are public clouds safe to use for healthcare, pharma organizations when migrated from on-prem?
Well, that is kind of a hot potato for me, but I'll take it. The answer is yes, but it really goes to what we just talked about with governance and the ecosystem you have around your data. You can put anything out and be concerned about it, but specifically for what we think about as sort of industry sort of compliance, that's been probably one of the biggest movers over the last couple of years to cloud. A little bit later than others because of these issues, but there are multiple layers about how the data is safe. There's the ultimate cloud vendor themselves, and a lot of them do certification, specific industry certification. There's something like we've been talking about the Snowflake Data Cloud. There are things that organization does to ensure safety of data. But I think those are more around the kind of making sure the controls are there, the boundaries are there. And I think that what we just talked about with data governance and being able to push real data security into the actual data itself, something that Snowflake really supports, and it's something that some of the policy features that we have at Elation help you do. I think that's really what makes it ultimately safe, is that now you're not just talking about putting the data in a very readable format when you make the switch to the cloud, you're really locking the data down as granular as possible in the cloud so that only people with proper authorization and the proper authority can actually get to the data. So I think that's absolutely safe. There's a lot of work to do, and that's, I think, why we've been doing a lot of talk about data governance, because it is those industries of compliance, banking, finance, insurance, healthcare, that are driving a lot of cloud adoption, and it comes right back to the governance, but real governance and security that results from it.
Yeah,
I'd be interested, Dave wanted to add on.
Yeah, this is Anthony, and I'll just add, I completely agree with Matt, right? So number one, a lot of these cloud vendors are SOC 2 certified. So if people are there from healthcare, I think they understand the SOC 2. They are SOC 2 certified, number one. When we talk to Snowflake about our IT security, the capabilities they had, which was more exciting to us, were far superior than what we ever invested and we had in our data center, right? So for us, when we moved our restricted data onto Snowflake, we feel more secure. We know what it is, right? So data classification policy, check, right? You got to have that. You need to understand what is more sensitive and what is more important to you even, right? Confidential. And then know who has access to that. Those are the few things I would focus on from a foundation perspective. But talk to the vendors you're talking to. There are a lot of vendors who are already SOC 2 certified. We have vendors, our core system is moving onto the cloud. And the first thing they did is went out and got SOC 2 certification before they came and presented a proposal to us. So that's Dave, go ahead.
I don't know if I have a whole lot more to add, but I think that it's responding to the higher degree of concern makes it even greater need for technology capabilities and processes to know where the data is, have a good inventory of that data, be in control of that data. So I think it's definitely, I think the public clouds can be safe, as Matt was saying, but probably on the organization side, just to have good processes and good technologies in place that can ensure that it's safely used and used in analysis and how it is shared and all those kinds of steps increases the importance of those processes.
Very good. Our next question for the group. Do you recommend having a raw and transformed data set stored in the cloud? If not, which is preferred? Do you want to start that one, Dave?
I can start this a little bit.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
there
Dave,
you go, Matt.
if you want to go ahead. Well, I just thought this was a very interesting question, and we've been talking a lot about transform process data. A lot of analytics takes place on process data, and in fact, the proliferation of it is driving a lot of the need for things that Data Catalog does. But there are lots of places for actual raw data. So you're thinking about clickstream and you're thinking about other things. So I think the answer is there's a cloud future, but when you're thinking about business value, you may see different motivations for those two different types of data. Again, I'm not going to guess about what industries you're in, but the higher value business directed data does tend to come across on the process data. And in fact, a lot of the work that we all do is organizing that side of the business. So kind of want to leave it there as an open-ended yes question. I'm not sure if Dave or Anthony have some other perspectives.
Well, I'll jump in. Yeah, I think I would underline what Matt said as well, because it often relates to, this almost gets to that ETL versus ELT kind of questions. And a lot of analytics do need raw data, but then you'd be surprised also in our research we see, a lot of analytics need that process and transform data as well. And a lot of those processes can take some of the headaches off the analysts and data scientists because they are repeatable and then things are reusable. So I think sometimes there's a process where organizations will bring in the raw data, then they'll start using the data and realize that they, as I mentioned, they needed to have these processes repeatable. They want the data to be something they can rely on, that is consistent, and so the processes for transformation and quality and profiling and all that get put in place appropriately. So sometimes it's a process that way. So a lot of organizations are moving, I guess you could say, raw data or at least semi or unstructured data into the cloud, into data lakes, and often with that intention of moving it in that direction. So I don't know if there's any one right answer to this. It kind of depends on what the use case is.
All right, thank you. And we have a question for Anthony, not to put him on the spot here, but what is the unexpected benefit or complication that you encountered?
Yeah, I think so we started and where we ended. Let me kind of talk about that. So where we started with traditionally every organization where they start, right? There's like, hey, what do we need to move? Then we very quickly realized as we got into design is we don't understand the purpose, right? Using a data catalog, going back and talking to our business leaders around what those specific business use cases are. So we actually changed our approach midway to make it more focused on what the purpose of that data is, who's using it, what's the most highly, the way Alation puts it, right, the most used columns and attributes in your system, which is used the most, move those data sets. So understanding that, it helped us change our approach. Before it was more anecdotal based on our SME's knowledge. Then it turned into Alation kind of going and giving that information and influencing the direction of the migration. So that was the most unexpected thing which we found out.
Great. Thank you very much. At this time, we have come to the end of our time today, so let me take a moment to thank our speakers today. We heard today from David Stoddard with TDWI, Matt Turner with Alation, and Anthony Serafin with Texas Mutual Insurance. Also, thank you again to Alation for sponsoring today's webinar, the actual virtual solution spotlight. Please remember that we recorded today's event and we'll be emailing you a link to an archived version of the presentation. Feel free to share that with colleagues. And don't forget, if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, use the click here for a PDF line. And finally, I want to remind you that TDWI offers a wealth of information, including the latest research, reports, and webinars about BI, data warehousing, and a host of related topics. So I encourage you to tap into that expertise at tdwi.org. And with from here today, let me say thank you very much for attending. This concludes today's event.